So I think we're ready to start. Okay, welcome. I'm Edwin Rutch. I'm from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and this is our Empathy Cafe for exploring the values that make up a culture of empathy. It's like we're looking at what are the basic values that make up an empathic society. And I'd like to start with giving our intention statement. So our intention in this cafe is to create a culture of empathy. So we're trying to create a mini culture of empathy here within this group. And in short, that means that everyone can openly and authentically express themselves and as they wish, and feel heard and listened to and understood to their satisfaction, and for this to happen mutually. And we do that through using empathic listening or active listening. The kind of just a quick overview, we're going to have just go around, everyone introduce themselves very shortly, then we'll just explain how to do an empathy circle for anyone that is not familiar with it. If everybody's familiar with the practice, we'll just skip that. And then we'll go into our breakout rooms to talk about what values are important to us, what do we see that are important in a culture of empathy, and then we'll come back and report back to the full group. And we're going to go for 2 hours. So we can start with participant introductions. And so just your name, where you're located, and just what is one value that you see as core to a culture of empathy. And I'll start. Edwin Rutch from the San Francisco Bay Area, and the one value that's core, I would say, is empathy. So, Bill, do you want to go? And maybe you could call on people too while I create rooms and stuff.
I'm Bill Filler. I've been working with Edwin for about 2 years, and I will say mutuality, just to keep mixing things up. And I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Sophia?
Yeah, my name is Sophia. I live in Sweden, and I agree with Bill on mutuality.
Okay, great. Katrina?
I'm Katrina Billings. I live in Bristol in the UK. I was going to say patience, actually. Throwing a bit of a curveball there. I think you've got to be quite patient to allow the process to unfold.
Oh, I can see that. James.
I'm James. I'm in New York. The value that I want to have and hold for a culture of empathy is not being a bullshit artist.
Okay. Tricky ground there. Ford?
Hi, my name's Ford. I was introduced to the group by Pavel. Hi, Pavel. Thank you. I'm in South London. I'm not sure empathy is not itself a value. So maybe next door to empathy that would kind of resonate well with it for me would be compassion.
Okay.
Andal.
Hi, I'm Andal in Hawaii, and I would say courage.
Courage, great. Pavel.
Hello, my name is Pavel, and I'm in Malta. I would say positive regard.
Great. Sally? You're muted, Sally.
Process. Hi, I'm Sally. I'm in Cathy's Valley, California. I'm really struggling with conflict between what you want for empathy and major problems that conflict with empathy.
Okay. Be anxious to hear that fleshed out in the circle. Dean?
Hi, I'm Dean from Plymouth in the United Kingdom. I believe the thing that is most important to empathy is honesty and trust. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I believe empathy is kindness and compassion towards yourself and others.
Okay, great. All right. So we've done the introductions, and I haven't seen Ford. Are you familiar with the empathy circle process? Did Pavel explain it to you?
I just watched the 9-minute video, so I'm up to
Okay.
speed, although I have no experience yet.
I see.
And I'm kind of
Okay.
excited.
Great. Well, it's great to have you here. I think what we can do, Edwin, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is that, you know, since you have the general lay of the land, we don't have to go through the explanation. I know I've seen everybody else here. And then you can kind of see it, Ford, modeled in the circle, and then you can kind of step in when you feel comfortable. Does that sound acceptable to you?
That sounds great. My one question is, I don't have 2 hours. Is it acceptable to leave at one point, or is that like ripping off a plaster?
Well, you know, it's good to do the 2 hours. How much time do you have?
An hour.
An hour. Okay.
I can step back and rejoin again next week. I'm very happy to do that.
Okay. I don't know, Edwin, but I think what we could do is that we could make one circle maybe with an extra person so that it's not as, you know, like if there are 3 people and all of a sudden one goes away, it's a bigger thing than if like 5 and then it goes to 4. That's fine. So that's okay with me. I don't know, Edwin, what do you think?
That's fine. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
do that.
Yeah, do something like that.
Great.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. So, Dean, can you facilitate a circle?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So the topic is, what is the value? We're not just kind of broad, your own personal value. And Bill, you're in circle 2 with
Okay.
Pavel facilitating, and could you record that circle?
Yes.
And James, would you be up for a circle with me?
Yes, I'd love that.
Yeah, it'll actually be just you and I thought.
Just you and me, huh? Okay.
It's like
okay.
mano a mano. So great.
Let's do it.
And it will be recorded too. So
what? It will be or won't be?
It will be, of course.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
I record everything.
Good.
So, great. Okay, then we'll do that, and we're all set. See.
Edwin,
Yeah.
don't forget to give Dean permission to record.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, folks. Let's see. Put Dean. Okay. So, do you know how to record, Dean?
Touch the red button at the top, and I'm on the iPad, so it should record. And then it'll, when we leave the session, I'll make sure it records to the cloud rather than to my device.
Okay. It's actually the button down below. Maybe it's different on the iPad. But you do see a recording button. Well, we don't need to record that one. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we'll have 2 of them recorded.
Dean, it's the same where the chat is. There's a record button, at least on computers.
Okay, so we have about an hour and a half before we come back. It'll be a quarter till the top of the hour that we come back to debrief. Okay, see you in the rooms. Here we go. Hey, James. Great. I thought we could have a chance to chat. I saw your posts and stuff. So, do you want to start, or should I start?
Yeah. I'll do time, and I'd like to start. So 5 minutes. I'm starting now. Yeah, so I met with Bill and Lou, and we had a 3-way empathy circle. And at the beginning, as I expected, they told me that they're not willing to allow me to participate in the trainings currently. So I told them what I tell everyone who excludes me from places. Great, it's your thing, your decision. You're entitled to making that decision, and you know best about what to include, who to include, and I don't want to fight them on that. I would rather than be the victim of someone who quote unquote excludes me, I'd rather know that I'm being excluded and participate in it voluntarily. And that's separate for me from having feelings about it. I do have a lot of feelings about it. I'm very angry.
Okay, can I reflect that?
Yeah.
So you did check, you had a call with Bill and Lou, and you discussed with them, and they said they didn't want to have you be part of the training. And you have understanding for that? It's, they're the ones facilitating, they can make their choices about it. But you're separating sort of that sort of understanding from like how you feel about it. And you do have strong feelings, you feel angry about it.
Yes. I think it's important when exclusions happen for there to be transparency about it rather than to hide it. Mm-hmm. So, my dream, I don't know if this happens anywhere, but my dream would be that whenever there is an exclusion, for that to be like the top news of the organization, that we, the organization would have the value of inclusion enough to say, we could not find a way to include this person. We regret it. We're making this decision based on X, Y, Z. But we want to be open about the decision. We don't want to pretend like it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Because by pretending that it didn't happen, I think additional unnecessary problems are created.
Okay, so you would like to see an organization that if it has exclusion in it, that it's sort of like publicly acknowledged, like we excluded, here's the reasons for it, and it's kind of like open and sort of transparent, that it's not like kind of hidden or something like that.
Yes. I think it's valuable for the community to have information about exclusion. Is there one person only who was excluded? Is there a pattern of exclusion? Are the reasons for the different exclusions different, or are they the same? And then when the community has that information, it can respond if it wants to, right? If the community feels, oh, that indicates that there is a trend towards, against cursing or against Black people, or whatever the trend of exclusion is, the more transparent the exclusions are, the more the community can respond, rather than one person in authority making all the decisions in the shadows.
Okay, so it's like you would like to see that the organization is kind of like open about the exclusion, and also sort of very nuanced about why is the exclusion happening, what is it, and then on one side versus someone who just says I'm in charge, I'm the authority here, this is what's happening, and finished, kind of. So
yeah, it's easy. It's, of course, the authority wants to say, well, I just have a feeling about it and it's too much trouble. But I think the whole community loses out when the authority doesn't do the work to give the principled reasons for the exclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's sort of a benefit to having, specific principle that maybe even values the underlying, why this is happening, kind of be articulated. And there's actually a benefit to having that clearly articulated.
Yes.
To the community.
To the community, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's my time. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah, so two things. One is I'm thinking, how does this fit in with a culture of empathy, right? That's what we're trying to create, is an empathic culture. So that's kind of one part of, and it does seem that empathy is about inclusion. You know, you try to include and hear everyone and kind of see and hear where they're coming from and try to be open there. So it does seem that inclusion is a value.
Yeah, so you're thinking about it within the frame of the values that we want to hold for this kind of culture, and you think inclusion is one of them.
Yeah, so I'm trying to, it's like the issue that comes up, like what with you, like there's different circles, and you and I are in circles, and I feel like when I haven't had any problem with you in any empathy circle, in the circle itself. I mean, you follow the process, you agree to it. I find you have like creative ideas, nuanced ideas that sometimes there's a lot of energy that you have, but actually that energy kind of raises the energy for everyone, I find. And I think it really contributes a lot, you know, so it's, yeah.
Yeah, so there are different circles, you know, you can't see everything. In all the circles that you and I have been in, you've seen that I follow the protocols of the circles closely. I bring in nuanced and intelligent ideas, and sometimes I bring in a lot of energy, but even when I do that, it adds to the circle you've seen.
Yeah, it's within the context. Like, you know, the idea here is you can say whatever you want. I remember one time you're like really angry about something and you directed it at Martha, but Martha just listened, heard you, you know, it was fine with her. And, you know, it added the energy level to the whole group kind of gets, I mean, there's kind of like a shakiness, right, from all that anger, but it kind of opens up other feelings versus kind of a very controlled sort of a feeling. It kind of shakes that up. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. You're remembering one time when Marta was facilitating, I directed my verbal attacks against her, my anger towards her. She received it, empathized, and the energy came into the group. It created a kind of, it rippled through the group. There was a shakiness, you felt a shakiness, and then, but the level of energy it had an impact, a constructive impact on the circle.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is where the problem happens is outside of the circle, you know, so it's like, I think there was one time we're just going around doing introductions, and I think Anish was there and some others, and you know, instead of just going, you know, name, where you're located, value, or whatever, I can't remember what it was, but it's like, I'm here, I'm mad, and I'm pissed off at Anish. So it kind of was this whole thing of going, so kind of beyond the scope of the introduction. So.
Yeah, so the introductions phase is actually outside of the boundaries of the circle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an invitation to come in with very specific things, usually name, location, maybe organization that you're with, and then maybe an answer to some prompt. But I used that when I was brought in. I didn't introduce myself. I verbally made some attacking statements, and so that is where the problems are getting generated.
Yeah, and it scares people. Like it creates sort of this level of fear because people don't know, oh, what's going on here, you know. So I just see that it creates a feeling of fear and tension and anxiety in people. And I think after that circle, I think it was Pavel, or who was it, or Pavel or Brian were in the circle. And he said, oh, I wouldn't be in the circle with James because of that, you know.
Yeah, it creates fear. It creates tension. People don't know what's going on. And you remember when we did a circle right after that, Brian had said, he said, well, after that happened, he was hoping that he wouldn't get put in the circle with me.
Yeah, but then he kind of started appreciating the circle itself. Okay, then he appreciated the circle itself because things kind of worked out and he kind of got new insights. So in the circle itself, it was all held, I thought, very well, and seemed like everybody not everybody, but some of us appreciated it.
Yeah, so then, but Brian actually came around. In the circle, Brian appreciated it. Other people appreciated it actually even a lot. And so in the circle, the magic happens, the energy, it works.
Yeah, I feel heard. There's more, but yeah. Time's up.
All right. Over the years, as I've taken on this, as I've explored this my challenges in being in containers, the way I understand what happens in settings like the empathy circles is that every system has boundaries. Like what you're saying, the empathy circle has a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the boundaries are a little bit blurry, like in the sense of the introductions. And I get into trouble when, rather than playing it safe around the boundaries, I explore the edges of the boundaries. And it activates the fear or threat response of the system members. So that's a pattern for me of what I would call playing fast and loose with the boundaries.
So you're saying that like every system has a set of has boundaries around it, and sometimes those boundaries are sort of gray, vague, and that you have kind of been over time have sort of been playing in the fast and loose with those boundaries.
Yeah.
And you kind of have that self-recognition that, yeah, this is what I do.
Yeah. And I feel very torn about it because there's a part of me that, yeah. Well, I really want to build containers. I don't want to destroy containers. And so, what's the word? Violating boundaries is a way of attacking a container. And so it makes sense that people would get uncomfortable or start reacting to that. At the same time, well, there's a trickiness to it because very often there's not an acknowledgement about the greatness of the boundaries. There's often an assumption by people that the boundaries are clear, and I came into as I'm crossing the boundary into the circle today, I certainly did have the impulse to say, hey, everybody, I don't want to introduce myself. That's bullshit. I want everyone to know that I was excluded from the facilitation trainings. And I took that in and I thought, yeah, that's gonna create more problems for me. I have a goal, like I want people to know about what's going on, but if I violate the boundaries in an attempt to service my goal, I will actually undermine my goal. It's clear to me about that. And then on the other hand, I see you, to some extent, also violating the boundaries of the circles in the sense that you brought me into this one-on-one space. And it's, it's a kind of a pattern of me getting singled out, whereas I explore the boundaries, systems move to really tighten, put the straitjacket on the boundaries in relation to me. And I think it's understandable, but this would be an example of that.
So you're really looking at like systems, kind of the boundaries, how the boundaries work, kind of that space, the grayness of the boundaries, and would like, yeah, it's like you'd even thought of sort of kind of mentioning that you'd been excluded from the training within the introduction, so as a way of, you know, just saying, hey, this is something that a boundary that's been created, or a structure that's been created that's exclusionary, and that yeah, and then even here, just you and I being together is a sort of a change of the structure and the boundaries, and so even I kind of shift the boundaries. So it's really about what's the nature of boundaries, and how do boundaries work, and what are the gray areas, and sort of exploring that, and kind of maybe even challenging them sometimes.
More on the side of really wanting to make them explicit and bring attention to them rather than challenging them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
so it's more kind of be open and explicit about what those boundaries are, and be, yeah, is what your intention is.
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
Yeah, I have that sense too. Like I see that when, you know, like when you, time that you were saying, oh, I'm really mad, you know, Anisha's here and all that kind of stuff, that Pavel had kind of gone on too, talking about something. So it was like there was a boundary, you know, name, so forth, and then he had kind of expanded on it. So it's like, hey, if he's expanding on it, why can't I expand on it? So it was sort of something that I did see. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're noticing that it's not black and white, that there may be cases where other people are also kind of going around the boundaries, edges, and you know, it makes sense that some people would say, hey, that's not fair. Why can't I kind of go around the edges too?
Yeah. And so I do see how you're in that gray area, you know, so I see that sense of the gray area. Makes me think about, you know, here having a separate circle. There's, the other circles have 4 participants. One has 5 because someone's going to be leaving there. So that was one part of it. And then I'm thinking, oh, a couple of the people in there have issues with being in circles with you. And I think, oh, there's that aspect. And then there's the other one is, I kind of looking forward to having this discussion with you to kind of explore it. So those are kind of different factors that came up, you know, for me about doing just 2 of us. And then I did make a request if that was okay. So
yeah. So factors that came up for you were, there were some people who didn't want to be in circles with me, and you had a sense that it would be, you know, a good conversation to get into the weeds with stuff with just the 2 of us, and then you made a request. You asked, you checked with me, and I agreed. So, so it worked out. It made sense to you to do it.
Yeah, and so, yeah, where to go? I guess the one thing is like that situation that I mentioned, you know, where you kind of, you know, got angry, and that those situations happen in there's other contexts where they happened. Like there was a time with in the facilitator support circle that's Bob was facilitating, you know, the circle, and sort of his 15 minutes to do, you know, to facilitate. And then, you know, he was kind of letting other people sort of just kind of run. I just kind of go on and on, right? It's like he just was not facilitating that time, and you know, I thought, okay, it's his time. You know, what should I do? And then, you know, you got really angry. You know, kind of, this is bullshit or something like that. So that was like another time, and you know, just that kind of posting in the chat room saying this is bullshit or whatever. I mean, that kind of scares people too. I see how that kind of, somehow there's something, some kind of fear gets created in people by that.
Yeah, so you're bringing up another example, facilitator support group. Bob was technically facilitating, but it was just kind of casual. And then I said, this is bullshit, or I wrote in the chat, I can't deal with this shit. And so that creates fear. People get fearful about the those kinds of outbursts.
Yeah, and I understand it, because the person that was speaking was kind of not really in the mode of just supporting. You know, he talked about grief, and she was going off into her own grief and issues of grief and going on, and it wasn't like, how can I support you? And as a facilitator holding these grief circles, she was doing her grief processing and just not stopping. I mean, just like going on and on. So I understand those, it was not really fitting in with the support, and plus it was going on, and there's kind of other issues within that I can see the problem there. I mean, there was a problem, really.
Yeah, so you saw that there was a problem because the facilitator wasn't really like stepping up to the challenge of having a person just kind of use the time, kind of steal the time, do their own grief processing, and not actually working with the person whose time it was to you know, work with them and support them. So you recognize that there is or was a problem.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah, I feel heard.
Yeah. Okay, so every time I get excluded now, the question I ask is, do I want to create an alternative opportunity that would include me? So, you know, if I get excluded from a festival, do I want to create a new festival that can include me and people like me? If I get excluded from the facilitator, empathy circle facilitator trainings, do I want to try to offer my own empathy circle facilitator training? So this is a solution that I've come up with, rather than to just be helpless and angry, is to say, well, what I really want is just spaces that include me and people like me. And so I call this project Overlapping Circles. It's kind of like there's a circle, and for some reason, I might know the reason or may not, but for some reason, they don't want me there. They might not be even able to articulate it in a principled way. Maybe they can a little bit principled, but I know that they don't want me there. It's clear. And so that's the circle. And then the idea would be that there's something about that circle that is attracting me. It's not just a soccer team. There's something about it that I like. And if I can't be there, is it possible, or do I have the energy or interest to create the alternative? And that's the overlap. And I did that with a call series starting 2 months ago called Nurturing Connections. It was a call I was kicked out of. And so I started a daily call, called it Nurturing Connections, Overlapping Circles. And it really worked out well. It really took the sting out of thinking of myself as being helpless. And of course, it wasn't the same call. It was a very different call, but just the attempt or the intention to like make it something that I wanted, rather than waiting for some people to give me what I wanted when they didn't want to give it to me, felt very empowering. I get excluded from more things than I can create, right? I can't create global festivals and trainings and groups and all of these things, but I am finding that even just bringing that up has been a real source of very productive investigation. And so like for today, for example, I'm thinking of going to the empathy circle facilitator support group and using my time to talk about that, rather than attacking building a culture of empathy and saying, you guys excluded me, shouldn't do that, saying, I'm going to meet you where you are. Me being in that training is not working for you guys, and I don't want to fight you on that. And instead, I want to incorporate what, there's some information, maybe they can help me understand better, but something like, you're a troublemaker and you being here is disruptive. And so is it possible that I then can be the seed of creating a training that holds the possibility of disruptive people learning how to facilitate? That's the germ of the idea. And actually, when I've presented these germs of ideas in other overlapping circles, it really takes people by surprise, as if like it surprises them that I would. I don't know how to say it, but it surprises people that their group doesn't include me. As amazing as that sounds, it's when they excluded me, somehow they didn't realize they're excluding me in the same way that when I take the power back and initiate something changes and they say, oh, is that necessary? And so, well, I've said a lot. So could you reflect?
Yeah, so it's in these groups you get excluded, and then when you get excluded, you see one way of sort of, and it sounds like it's painful, and one way of sort of taking the power back is to even conceptually think of, oh, I'll create an alternative of the same event, but it will not exclude others, and it'll have a space for people who are disruptive, and that you find that when you mention this to people, that they sort of, it kind of gives them an insight, some sort of an insight into the nature of how they've excluded you or what they've done.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. I'm not so arrogant to think that I wouldn't exclude people. I understand, and I have excluded people. So it's not so much that I'm making a promise not to exclude anyone, but it's more I'm creating a possibility of widening the scope of inclusion to me and people like me. Yeah.
Oh, so it's not like you would not exclude people. You have excluded people, but sort of that expanding the scope, I guess, of inclusion. There's still exclusion, but there'd be a greater scope of inclusion.
Yes.
And so there's sort of, yeah, you're just having that clarity about that.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay. So I guess the issue then was with the training, and the training is led by, I'm kind of just a support person for this training, and it's by Bill and Lou. So, and I know Bill feels concerned about you being in the training. So I think that's kind of the core about that training.
Yeah, so you're a support person on the training, and it's being led by Bill and Lou, and the main issue is Bill's concern about me being there.
Yeah, and it's like, and so I'm kind of like weighing, okay, somebody's facilitating something, can they exclude or not? Of course, I think it's their choice. So if they want to exclude, and then there's a different question of, if I was facilitating something, would I exclude or not exclude? So those are kind of two different, there's subtle sort of differences there.
Yeah, so structurally you're thinking, since can the person in charge exclude? And you think, yes, it's that's their prerogative. And then a different question is, would you exclude?
Yeah, and I think I have a higher, for people who are disruptive in some way, I think I have, just have more experience and more kind of openness. So I think in terms of that scope, I think my scope is larger than maybe, maybe Bill's, or So for if I was leading, a facilitation, my scope is larger, bigger in terms of if somebody's just like, I'm here just to disrupt, I'm just gonna not follow any of the rules, I'm not gonna reflect, or I'm just gonna speak whenever, at some point I would say, okay, I would try to empathize, I would try to listen.
Yeah.
At some point, if they're just, wanting to blow everything up, I would exclude, I'd hit the eject button, I guess.
Yeah. So you're just recognizing that people have different preferences and capacities. You feel like you've had experience with disruptive people enough, and you feel more comfortable, maybe more comfortable than the other facilitators, to include some disruption. But but you also that you have your limits too. You can identify some behaviors that would lead you to hit the eject button.
Yeah, but it hasn't, within the circle, it's like, I haven't had that. I've never excluded somebody from the circle because they've always kind of tried to just follow the rules. Maybe they struggle or something, but, I just kind of show, oh, this is how you do it, and kind of bring people back, and then it seems to work. So I haven't excluded there. Within the circle, it feels pretty solid. I haven't had, real problems once people agreed to that. I guess it's possible they'd say, hey, I'm just not going to do this anymore, and I'm just going to talk. But I've never had that happen. So.
Yeah. The circle itself has been very secure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never happened where there was somebody in the circle who was flagrantly going against all of the structures of the circle where you needed to eject them. There were some transgressions but it was more like people not understanding than intentionally transgressing.
But another comes to mind. This is actually a family issue. It was like really heated. One family member spoke to me, I reflected, and then I chose the other person, and that person says, I'm the one in pain, I should be heard here. It's like, why are you listening to them? And I said, and it's like, I said, well, it's my choice. It says, no, she just would not want to do it. And I said, well, let's stay with the empathic listening process. And I said, no, they were breaking out totally. It's like, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's like, I should be heard, not the other person. It's not your choice to choose who. I'm the one that's most pain. And then it's like, they were not willing to stay within the structure. And I said, well, I'm not willing to stay here in this structure, so I'm going to be leaving. So, so I was the one that was about to leave, and then it was like, oh, okay, I don't want to lose you. I'll go back to the structure. So that was sort of maybe one of the most extreme there.
So there was a situation where you were doing a circle with your family, and someone got triggered, and they didn't want to follow the protocols. The protocol is that you would have gotten to choose the next listener, and they didn't. They opposed, and they broke structure, and they just kept talking. And based on that, you decided, well, the circle didn't exist anymore. The protocols were being ignored and attacked, and so I think said you decided to leave to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then maybe you returned because you wanted to.
No, they kind of acquiesced because they didn't want to lose my participation. They realized that I was serious. I was not going to be there and do that structure. I was going to leave, and it was goodbye.
So when they saw that you were serious about ending the circle, if it was going to go out of the structure, they then on their own chose to come back into.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel heard.
Okay. So in my other project, in the joining game, we do a lot of this boundary exploration. And yesterday, to our joy, we had the Zoom bombers join our call for the first time in 2 months. And we welcomed them. They did their bombing. They were broadcasting pornographic stuff into our group. And we really, we welcomed them. And, it was, I guess it was just a kind of, they they went against our structure in the sense of, you know, we have a pretty clear structure as well, but we've been experimenting a lot with what happens when someone comes in, does this kind of flagrant attacking of the structure, you know, and so we kind of open the floor to them. At 5 minutes, they left. They got bored with us and they left. And we even tried to get them to stay. We said, you know, we would love to have Zoom bombers constantly attacking our calls and working with this. This is, you know, cutting edge for us to play around, see how it feels to be attacked in this way. And they weren't interested. They just left.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's basically the principle of every disruption, is that someone just wants to know if you can hold them or not. And then when you can, they lose interest. And it's just a matter of, you know, capacity. I mean, I could certainly, the Zoom bombers were not an issue, but I have, like I said, I've had some extremely disruptive individuals who refuse to, who just continuously attack the structure. And the line that was crossed for me was when the person posted my home address on Facebook, and I said, "Okay, you're out." Like it wasn't just me. I thought, you know, that's kind of like a threat to other people, and I sat with that, and I kept them out of the group for 2 weeks, and then I brought them back into the group actually after 2 weeks. I made the decision to bring them back in, and it's been really meaningful to bring them back in. But it's not something that I would ever expect someone to do. I mean, I think that there are real, you know, good reasons to exclude people at times. And I would never, you know, just like I would never make the decision for someone else if they should sign up for the military, I just wouldn't make that decision for another group. I'd like to be able to say what I think, but I wouldn't want to make the decision for others. So, you know, like my idea of doing an overlapping circle for a facilitator training in the empathy circles community is not just, you know, poking fun at the other trainings. It's like, for me, it's serious. It's seriously saying, like, we as a community build capacity by finding ways to include difficult people. I don't want to force anyone to include difficult people, but is there anyone, you know, who sees the value in that? And then let's play around with that. It's, I think, just as frustrating as it is, it can be just as rewarding. I have found an enormous amount of growth and psychological freedom from playing around with some very disruptive people, and then really just kind of getting into my own and thinking, yeah, this is not threatening to me. I know exactly what I want to do. Every time it happens, I can clearly state, you know, what's happening, what I'd like to happen, what I'm going to do. It all becomes much clearer as a result of having the practicing with the disruptions rather than being surprised by them. That's what people, I think, get freaked out about.
So there's that, you've had your own group where you try to bring in, you know, variety of people, not be exclusive, and you had and you've got a structure to that, and you had the Zoom bombers that came in, try to disrupt. They were showing the pornography, etc., and you were open to them, and you found that, hey, when you were open, trying to engage them in dialogue in your process, that they kind of got bored. It's like, okay, we're going to go, they're not triggered. So, and that you're trying to expand sort of that space of maybe that empathic, or that inclusion, that sense of inclusion. You do have your boundaries too at some point, that you had the boundary of somebody putting your address out there, and, you know, and that was kind of, then at that point you excluded them, and you kind of excluded them, made your space smaller, but then later on you included them again. So it sounds like it's almost like a inclusion exclusion, that it has a, you know, it maybe has a dynamic aspect to it, and it's not, maybe you're trying to expand the space of inclusion and that you feel, it sounds like you feel like you learn from being on that edge and kind of grow from that edge.
Yeah, and I want to just clarify, I am expanding my own capacity as a person and as a facilitator rather than forcing other people to stretch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're saying that you're having greater capacity for holding disruption or whatever, so you're putting it on yourself to grow versus like, hey, putting it on the other person to shut up or whatever or leave or yeah.
Yes, and that's time. Thank you. I feel
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess it was with the training. I guess I'm still trying to think that through. That in terms of a training, if I was facilitating a training, I don't think I would exclude you. So the other part is there's this. I think that's what Bill and Lou tried to do. Is okay. There's a problem. There's an issue, but we're going to talk to you about it. So there's like, we're going to have an empathic dialogue about it. So I see that as sort of a constructive, inclusive way forward. Like, hey, here's this problem. There's certain things that are happening. They're disruptive to people, scaring people. We're going to talk to you about it. So, so they did reach out, and I wasn't part of that. Maybe I should have been, but.
So yeah, you think that if you were doing the training, you still want to explore this training issue, and if you were doing the training, you don't think you'd exclude me, but you see that for them, for Bill and Lou, that it's not. They came at it with the goal of doing some dialogue about it, and they reached out to me. We had a dialogue about it. And as a way of kind of letting me know what the issues are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're thinking, you're wondering if it was maybe a mistake not to be involved in that discussion.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's kind of them leading. I don't want to like be part of everything. It's like, have some limits, but yeah. So that could have been another thing, but yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of curious how that dialogue went. If it felt like it was kind of some form of any form of resolution. Yeah. So just have some curiosity about that.
You don't want to be involved in everything. You want there to be things that are going on outside of you. You have your own limits too, but you are curious. Like, what was there? Was it constructive? What did it lead to anything in the end that was constructive?
Yeah, because I see that the only problem I'm seeing is kind of that anger that you have, and you vent the anger kind of outside of the circle, and then it scares people. People are triggered, upset, scared by it, and that a facilitator trying to hold a space can kind of feel overwhelmed, or they maybe feel a sense of responsibility for the well-being of everyone. So it's kind of that anger part that kind of lashes. So this lashing out of anger that's kind of like, yeah. If that anger hadn't been in those situations, I don't think it'd be a problem for people. If all the anger came out in the empathy circle, great.
Yeah, so it's an issue about anger, about lashing out in anger outside of the circle. You don't think, if that had not happened, you don't think that we'd be having this discussion. It wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, I sense myself, like when that happens, I sense an anxiety sort of rise in myself. But I also have a sense of, this is kind of challenging. How do we deal with this? I have a feeling of concern because it creates sort of an energy, among all the participants. Like some of the people have never done an empathy circle. That like it's like, this is something new, and this is like, what the hell's going on? What have I gotten myself into? So we have a whole variety of people with different skill awareness level. So there's sort of that kind of issue too.
Yeah, so there's different people. People are coming in for the first time. They encounter something, they encounter the circle, which they've never encountered. And then this other thing starts happening, and it's, people have all kinds of different reactions or responses to it. And there's different, in the spectrum of people, different levels of experience. And
Yeah, one thing with that anger, you know, you could have responsibility too for calling for a circle too. I mean, there's what is it? It is like, have you been denied a circle, right? Is somebody said? I mean, we talked about that with civil rights, right? With this, that you do the action because the people in power or whatever will not dialogue, and then you do something, right? But have you made a request like, hey, I'm really pissed off about this. Can we have an empathy circle, you know, about it? So I haven't seen that. It's just like, hey, I'm just pissed off.
yeah,
And that's it, you know.
yeah, you're curious about, like, maybe what is holding me back from initiating a circle. The idea with the circles is that when, you know, that if we haven't been heard, if there's, that we initiate one and we invite people into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you think, rather than just leaking it out in other places, to bring it, create a container and invite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and has it been denied? Then yeah. Anyway, that's my turn, but I feel heard.
Has it been denied? That's the question. At the end. Yeah. So I want to. So the circle with Lou and Bill was very productive. Very happy that it happened. I give them a lot of credit for inviting it and doing it. And I think we all learned from doing it. It's not the end of the road. There's definitely a lot of, Bill and I have a lot of differences. And I think so both of us are kind of holding that. You know, Bill, I think, is really, he has certain opinions about cursing and verbal abuse that I don't share. And, you know, I heard some things from him that concerned me around, you know, the prerogative of shutting down the circle if it gets to a certain, you know, if people are saying, even in their share, saying things that he doesn't think are okay. And it just goes against everything that I've learned about spaces that are actually supportive. Policing language is really undermines all of that. But I'm not him, and I want to coexist with different people in a community, because the building a culture of empathy community is more than just me and Bill. So, but there's a tricky part there around where he's not just he's a kind of, you know, he's got some authority in the community. So, and I have a pattern of struggling in relation to my anger with people in authority. That's my pattern, right? Bill is a really sweet guy. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, I am angry at Bill. I'm angry about this happening, and it's hard for me not to blame him. But I also see my responsibility in the sense of my agency and things that I can do. And one thing is wanting to do a separate training. The other is wanting to follow through on, you know, my idea to do what I hate about empathy circle. That to me seemed more interesting than just, I don't know, you know, naming people and saying, I'm angry at you, come in. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel myself changing from participating in this community, funneling into more constructive paths. And there's just a weird dynamic where the more I get focused, the more this community also gets focused, the more the expectations rise. I mean, the requests of me, I can see them ramping up slowly over time as I participate, and so it's a bit of a dance to stay in engagement with each other as both sides develop and evolve. Yeah, for me, my intention, I told them, and I'll say it again, my intention is absolutely to give them the freedom to have the facilitation training that they want. They're the leaders and owners. And it's a little tricky in this whole community because normally in other areas, I would really try to keep it confidential and just talk about the systems. So if I were to make a post nowadays, as much as possible, if I make a public post on Facebook, I say, there's a group that excluded me and this is what the person did. And I try not to name people. This community is so transparent, and that's a value that I love about this community, that it makes it harder to talk about it without it becoming clear who I'm talking about. And I really don't want at all to target Bill and Lou. And of course, you mentioned them. I mean, we can't have this conversation without it being obvious who we're talking about. And so, and then the recording as well. I'm not against it, but I'm aware that of the impact of doing this recording and having them be named, with the expectation that they'll watch it, other people will watch it, other people will think about, it'll impact people's views of Bill for better or worse. Is he a bad facilitator? Why is he excluding people? Oh, I love Bill. I hate James. I want to always be with Bill. I mean, all of that kind of stuff will happen. I don't know how productive that is. And so I have, that's my time. So
yeah, you've got a lot of questions about the openness. You love the openness and transparency, but sort of naming people, it sounds like it creates a whole series of different effects and an add-on, and so you have some questions about that. And you've been trying to avoid kind of naming specific people, kind of get more into the generalities of the community itself, kind of and there's the other part that you did have. You appreciated the empathy circle with Lou and Bill, and there's still issues you feel between you and sort of the views, ways of being between you and Bill. It's sort of unresolved.
I want to just finish a thought which relates to that, which is that there's a few choices. There is being able to name people and having it be transparent. That's one choice. Being able to name people and not having it be transparent and recorded in public. And then a third, which is having it be transparent and public and having a rule against naming people. And those are three very different options. So
okay, so you're kind of breaking it down, and I'm not sure I said there's it being transparent and not naming people, being transparent and naming people, and then being private and then naming people. So each of those is a different sort of experience, and maybe with different consequences, and just wanting to differentiate the nuances of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I feel heard.
Yeah, so I guess there was still that question that I had about that you've got, that there's an issue that you have, right, with something. And I see that the issues are legitimate. They're like legitimate questions about something. And then it's about, I don't see a request from you to have an empathy circle. And I see that that's of a culture of empathy, that's sort of a principle of a culture of empathy, that if we have a problem, that we can ask people we can request an empathy circle with them. And we're sort of like, I don't know if the word is obliged, or we agree that if we're part of an empathy circle, that yes, of course, we will take part in an empathy circle if somebody requests it. So, and I don't know what the value, that there's a value that I think that's part of empathy. That's part of the relationality of empathy, right? It's like we want an empathic relationship, and that we can, if there's some problem, we can request, an empathic dialogue, and that we're of course going to be willing to take part in it with anyone, right? So that's kind of still a question for me about kind of the approach that you have.
Okay, so your question is framed within a culture of empathy. You believe that it's if someone has an issue, they, in a way, have maybe a duty, or it makes a responsibility to say, hey, I have an issue and I would like to then invite people into a dialogue within this container. And then people who receive that invitation have a kind of a duty or responsibility, if they want to uphold the principles of empathy, to agree and say, yeah, I will come and talk to you in that space, in that container.
And in terms of that, like saying what can come up in an empathy circle, that's come up, like, we can't talk about everything. Some people, do we not have things that we don't talk about, you can't be, demeaning or judgmental or something like that. I never said that. I'm not about to take that on, because I'm pretty adamant that within the empathy circle, say whatever you want. So that's, I'm not doing, politically leftist, social justice, like you can't say stuff or whatever, or, any group kind of a lot of have like, what's that you should be free, that we are free to say what we want in the empathy circle.
Yeah, so this issue has come up around what is it, is there something that's not okay to talk about? And you're not a part of that. You're pretty adamant, you're adamantly in favor that inside the empathy circle, there's nothing that is out of bounds to talk about. And you're not doing this kind of left side or right side.
Political correctness of,
political correctness.
Yeah. And, people start talking about it I think it's important that people can express themselves. And it's actually, as we develop that confidence in the empathy, you see, well, you just hear people out, and that's kind of transforms the discussion. It kind of builds connection, and whatever that anger, fear, whatever those emotions are, once they get kind of heard and they get empathized with, it sort of transforms them into connection, into a constructive way. So I have sort of a faith, and I've just seen it over and over again. So I have this faith that people, in that process.
Yeah, so you have faith in the process, that if there are people who are bringing in a lot of that anger or hostility or whatever, that in the process, it gets transformed. We hear people, and that impacts people. We change, they change. That's the whole project.
But not everybody has that faith. That seems to be at different levels. People have a shifting levels of how they're able to receive. It's like just because that family member who spoke to me about the pain, and then I spoke to somebody else, I didn't speak back to them, it was like triggering, and it was like, they were willing to blow the whole discussion up. So not everybody can handle that, but I do feel that we can grow in that sort of awareness. And in the empathy circle, you just keep doing it and doing it. You kind of do slowly grow in that capacity, is what I find.
Yeah, so people have different capacities. Some people get thrown more easily, and so not everybody agrees with you. And so, like the family example, they were ready to throw the whole circle out if they were emotionally at a certain limit, and yet that as we do the circles over and over and over, people's capacity expands.
And trust, and there's a trust in the process, that builds. So, I feel heard.
I'm very much on the same page with you on both of those points. In the circle, nothing is out of bounds, and it's a relief to be met there, because that's everything. And then somehow, for myself, just making space for the fact that not everyone is there, not everyone shares that opinion, that's my job, definitely my job. It's the same thing about lashing out in anger outside of the circles. Managing that's my job. I accept that. And I continue to be interested in some of the gray areas around this. For example, in the cafe, when people say, I don't want to be, is a list of people who don't want to be in circles with me increases, it seems like there's a reckoning that's coming around that, around the question of, I know Bill has said, he doesn't want to force people to be in a circle. And I don't either. I don't want to force people to be in a circle with me. But maybe it would be useful to know who those people are, or maybe they're, maybe, and maybe they don't want that either, right? So there's continues to be some gray areas around how the facilitation of giving people that choice impacts people. If there's a group of people who are like, we know all the people who hate James, but James doesn't know, then that impacts things as well. I feel impacted by that.
I could reflect what I was hearing so far. So it started with, I was hearing some real appreciation for this, for, that value of everything is speakable in the empathy circle. And you kind of feel met there, that there's sort of a sense of maybe connection and mutuality that we have, and appreciation of that. But you're seeing sort of another gray area that you're about, people that don't want to be in a circle with you, and hey, what's the meaning of that? And there's some kind of a reckoning that that needs to be somehow addressed, and how do we address that? And then also an appreciation for that the stuff that happens outside of the circle is something that you need to deal with and address, is the other part.
But I would say that allowing people to participate, who then kind of, when they come in and participate and then exclude people who are participating, that's actually allowing people into the community who are attacking the community. Because if we agree that, the culture of empathy is that we're people who appreciate the dialogue, then allowing a bunch of people in to the cafes who are undermining some basic principle of the cafe is actually undermining the whole community. And and that I don't know, I'm like, it either falls on the shoulders of the facilitators of the cafe, in which case, well, either that, or it falls on the shoulders of like people participating in the cafe who it's
So that aspect of exclusion, someone says, hey, I don't want to be in a circle with James, that you see that is actually an attack on the process and on the circle itself. And you're kind of just trying to kind of understand that and kind of make sense out of that. And so who does that fall on? Is that on the community? Is on the facilitator? Like, who's kind of got responsibility for that?
The most dangerous thing, in my opinion, would be for it to fall on the person who's being excluded, right? So if the facilitators come around and say, yeah, people don't want to be in a circle with you, James, and it's your fault, you've got to deal with it, that I think is a big delusion. in a big mistake. It's actually very clearly not about that person that is happening. So.
If sort of the exclusion happens on the person that
no, if the responsibility
the responsibility. Oh, I see. Yeah, so if the responsibility is put on the person that people don't want to be in a circle with, then there's some kind of a lack of, maybe that's not really a culture of empathy, or there's some kind of you see that as a problem if that's where the blame goes. It's kind of like what do they call it? The sacrificial
scapegoat.
It's scapegoating. Yeah, it's scapegoating. You're the scapegoat. We have a problem. We put it on you, and we'll sacrifice you for our sins or something like that, which belong to everybody in a sense.
Right. Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
Oh. Yeah, in a culture of empathy, it would be, we talked about that in the circle before. If someone says, I don't want to be in a circle with someone, that I also see that's there's a sort of a conflict there. And the way to solve that conflict is to have an empathy circle about it, right? It's like, okay, here's a problem. We need to have an empathy circle to talk about it. And then the argument would be that, well, I don't want to talk to this person, and now they're controlling me being in a circle with them. But then I would also say that a culture of empathy has the premise that we're willing to dialogue with everyone. So, so maybe those principles need to be, and that's actually what this group is about. It's like when you start exploring these principles, these values, what are the broad values, and then the rule that manifests the value. And I think that inclusion, that whatever that value is, but for me, the principle is that we dialogue with everyone. Plus, if somebody requests an empathy circle with you, that you're willing to dialogue about that. So I do see that as a problem.
You see it as a problem. You see it as a question, an issue where people are saying they don't want to be in the group with somebody, and then if they're forced, then they kind of become reactive. They don't want to be forced to have a dialogue, and I guess you're saying it's a kind of chicken and egg thing where if people say they don't want to be in a dialogue, the foundation of the culture of empathy is that, well, then we have a dialogue about that.
Oh, just a second. I just see somebody needs to be assigned to a room here. Okay. Yeah, I'm doing the tech too, so I just saw something. So was I speaking or you?
You're speaking.
You're reflecting me. Trying to.
I'm reflecting you as you say that somebody, there's a chicken and egg thing where somebody says, I don't want to be in a circle, but then we invite them to have a circle about not wanting to be in a circle.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a chicken and egg. What is it? It's not quite a chicken and egg. It's kind of people getting what they want, right? It's like, I want the exclusion. I want to be in this, and it's a battle between who's going to get what. But for me, the overall principle of a culture of empathy is that if somebody requests a circle with you, that you're willing to take part in that circle, because that's what we're trying to create, is a culture of empathy. So no matter how difficult, maybe we need kind of support stuff like pre-circles, support circles to kind of bring people to that. They to kind of help support people. But I do see that is the ultimate goal, is that, I want to be part of a culture of empathy, and, talking to whoever, anybody is part of that. So.
Yeah. You see that being open to talk and have dialogue is an essential part of a culture of empathy, and that there may be some practical structures that could be put in place, like pre-circles or something, but fundamentally it's going to all lead to openness to having these circle dialogue.
Yeah, because doing these political things, I had done circle with James Damore, who was kicked out of Google, for the Google memo. Did 3 circle. I mean, he's the sweetest, nicest guy you can imagine, and he's willing to talk with anybody about anything. And, I reached out to feminists and stuff. Well, hey, you're pissed off with him. Would you talk? And it's like, no way we're going to talk. We don't want to give him attention. He's this. And it's like over and over again, I just see like, no, we're not going to talk, and just the whole spectrum of reasons for why we're not going to talk with you. And that's a problem. That's a problem in our society, and for building a culture of empathy when people have all these, excuses for not being willing. And it's not just talk. It's a talk in an empathy circle. If it's just going to be a debate, an argument, I can understand, because I don't want to be part of that. But to talk in an empathy circle where you will be fully heard and the other person will be fully heard. So, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is really important, because it's not the first time it's happened where you're trying to organize circles and people don't want to participate. You were organizing for an individual maybe on the right who, when you met with them, was a very gentle person, and you invited certain people, feminists, and they were very clear they didn't want to participate. They didn't want to give the person attention. They didn't want to allow a dialogue. They didn't want to be seen in a dialogue. And you see that as being a societal problem of having all of these restrictions against dialogue being set up. It's a problem.
Yeah. It's not just you. It's like, hey, this is pretty big social, it's on a massive social scale what's going on here. And
yeah.
I see that it's a block to a culture of empathy, and so I'm looking for ways of, working through. I don't have, and I appreciate, this discussion, because it's so nuanced, and, because that's what we need to get into, is find the solutions to, how do we address this?
Yeah, you don't have the solution necessarily, but you are happy that we're getting into the nuances about it for maybe finding a path through for weeks.
Yeah, and one of the nuances is like the civil rights, right? Is like you invite the people into a empathy circle. They don't want to do it. You sit at the lunch counter. You get beat up. You kind of reveal kind of what's happening, but then it ends in an empathy circle, and that's a King. King had that. He didn't have the empathy circle. It was in dialogue, but I think the empathy circle is more demanding than just plain dialogue.
Yeah, there's this strategic element or principle around forcing the issue, whether you call it, escalating the conflict, or bringing, going to sit at the lunch counter, and then that brings some of the issues to the surface. The contradictions or the conflicts come to the surface, and then when they do, then you say, yeah, well, that's what we want to have the circle about. So it gets initiated. That fits within the tradition of Kingian nonviolence.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't necessarily have the structure of the empathy circle, but he was bringing these issues up to the surface, and people were talking about it, and that is, the values were there, the same values.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, so I feel heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I second everything you just said. It's a societal problem. Cancel culture is a societal problem. shutting down of dialogue is a societal problem. You know, it's at a society scale. It's not my personal problem.
So you're seconding the societal, cultural aspects of it, and it's just not you somehow. It's like the whole culture, society is dealing with this.
Yeah. You sitting here in this circle for me, with me, is for me what gives building a culture of empathy the life it has. It's more than just saying, it's doing. This is the showing up that is required. And I'm just thinking back to that moment when you asked me if I wanted to have this dialogue with you. And I don't know how to articulate this, but I want to invite others in to this space. Like, I'm glad that this space exists, and I want to invite others who want to be here into this space. And I want other people who do empathy in their own way to do it in their own way. Like, I really want them to do it in their own way. The trainings are public. There's videos of the trainings, and I have thought to myself, you know, I feel like it's a duty for me to watch those videos and say, you know, and to respond to them, not to make a personal criticism, but to say, you know, this is how the training is happening, and this is how I think it would be different if I was there. This was what this is my part, not to undermine the training, but simply because, like, I'm part of this community, and I don't know how to be a part of the community and to silence my voice in various ways. I don't want to bring people in and silence their voices. I want to expand. I want to encourage people to speak. So anything in this community that has to do with silencing voices is, you know, I feel like a shark drawn to blood in the water. I want to pick at that and say, like, oh, am I not allowed to comment on the videos, or, you know, all of these things. But it seems like somehow it seems like a distraction. I want more to get really at the root. And I think this conversation around values is helping me do that to some extent.
Okay, so this discussion about values is, we're kind of doing the empathy here. We're creating a space. There's a sort of an energy and maybe an empathic space, and that you would like to invite others into this empathic space to kind of have this sort of this exploration that we're doing, and that in terms of the posting to the videos that it's like there's an exclusion there. You're drawn to that. It's like a shark to kind of address it, but maybe there's a different way. You're thinking there's a different way of sort of approaching it, and maybe what we're doing here is like a way to put the energies into.
Yes, thank you. That's my time.
Yeah, so I enjoy this too. Like once you said, "Oh, I got a warm feeling," or affection for Edwin. I appreciate that. I'd have affection too for you, in the sense that you do bring up a lot of interesting, insightful aspects that other people don't bring up. So I have an appreciation for that.
Yeah, you have a warm, fuzzy feeling for me, and it's mutual. You like the way I bring up issues and aspects that are going unseen or unmentioned that other people don't see or don't mention.
Yeah, and then there's still that aspect of sort of outside of the circle is that anger that comes out sometimes. It's that energy, that raw, that raw, angry, and just like how, you know, I don't know. It's like that's where the issue is for other people. I think, you know, it's like, and I just don't know what to, you know, what can yeah, it's. Yeah, let me just get the reflection on that.
Yeah, so the other hand, the other side is the raw anger energy that is coming up outside of the groups. That does not give you a warm, fuzzy feeling. That is what scares people and maybe brings you some concern.
I notice in terms of a felt experience, there's sort of a feeling of sort of control and sort of structure, you know, to kind of hold all this stuff and it in my body, there's like a controlled sort of a feeling at one level, and all that anger and stuff kind of help it kind of opens it up, right? And in some sense, it's kind of feels good, right? Because it kind of there's sort of this structure is sort of oppressive, and anger kind of I don't know, it just shifts the energy. So there's something about it that is energizing and kind of helps shake up you know, structure or something.
Yeah, so you notice, you're aware of the felt experience for yourself of how it you were doing this. It kind of like shakes up something for yourself, brings up a closing of protective, that, you know, you want to make sure you kind of have a hand over that the whole project is kind of like working and it's not falling apart. But then you also see the energy is, it brings energy in. You feel, I can't remember the word was fun or energized, but there's something that you like it, and it shakes things up and it brings things up that seem valuable. I think you're saying even outside of the empathy circles when the anger energy comes up.
Well, it's about the whole culture of empathy, right? It's like it's and personally too. But the other aspect of a culture of empathy is the creativity aspect. You know, how do we not have it be just control? And it's control because of all the, you know, it's all the technical stuff that needs to be done. So it's just a lot of organizational control that's kind of done. But how can creativity be brought into a culture of empathy? And I think that if there was some way of really releasing creativity, that would be very attractive to, I don't know, it's just something I'm just thinking about. I don't even have the answer to it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, so there's something about creativity. There's something about releasing the energy or releasing the energy in the anger that then becomes creativity, or that tapping into the creativity somewhere, so that you know, that the structures or the community is not calcified.
Yeah.
And that's people get drawn in, people get attracted to that.
Yeah, it's sort of a constructive creativity. Like if you go into the design community, they're really into creativity. Like, you know, you're brainstorming on a topic and you want to think of crazy ideas, you know, that just kind of get your mind out of where it is. Because when you have those other crazy ideas, they give you other jumping off points. It kind of opens your mind up. And somehow the empathy movement, if it could tap into that creativity better, that it would, I think it would really be attractive to people, because it's so refreshing, right? It's so fun to have creative ideas and to be riffing off of other people. And I don't have the answer to it, but yeah, it's just something, I don't know, I'm totally off on a different tangent here somewhere, but it's kind of where it's led me to.
Well, so you think that the whole empathy movement could benefit by tapping into creativity more, kind of like the way they work in art schools or design schools of, you know, you create these spaces where people are just allowed to to go anywhere with any crazy idea, and that that allowance or that freedom then, you know, can get feeds back into the work. And yeah, you said you didn't know if you're going off on too far off on a tangent.
Yeah, I feel heard.
My understanding of systems is that creativity comes out of containing of information. And so the value of the empathy circle container is that it is a generator of creativity. I constantly have the experience that when I'm able to contain personally my anger, to then bring it to a group container like an empathy circle or some other circle, that I personally experience the transformation of that information into creative energy. I feel more creative, I get more creative, I have just outpouring of ideas. And I also see it operating at the group level. I mean, I can say that in the last 2 months, right, the building culture empathy groups have had a lot of creativity, you know, churning in them that has led to a lot of different circles and series. And so it is about the container. It's, you know, it's stronger and stronger containers allow for that transformation of information into creative energy. And then yeah, so I think I want to just join you on the, I don't know if you saw it as mourning, but it is a mourning for me that I discharge my anger outside of containers that are built to hold it. It's just it's yeah, I mean, it's the difference between pouring gasoline in my car gas tank and pouring it on the living room couch. It's totally different.
So you were imagining that I had a sense of mourning that you kind of, how you address your anger being outside of a structure that can kind of hold it, like a gas, like an engine, versus, you know, burning down your, oops, let me just drop out. I gotta. It's like, yeah, you have a sense of mourning, actually, that your anger is put through, you know, outside of a container where it can be creatively, constructively used.
Yeah,
maybe.
I do have a mourning around that.
And there was another part too about systems. You're kind of talking about systems and how systems can hold kind of creativity, and that the empathy circle you see has sort of held. It's been a bit of an engine in that sense for creativity.
Yes.
That you have had in the last couple of months. A lot of creative ideas have come up through just kind of being heard and in the empathy circle.
Absolutely.
Hearing.
Me personally, and I've also seen it in others. Yes. And so this, I don't know if this is a principle, but there's something about accurately assessing the capacity of containers. You know, you don't put nuclear fuel into a car gas tank. You want an amount of fuel or a type of fuel that is fit for the engine. And there, we can build stronger engines. You know, we can build bigger cars and truck engines and nuclear power plants, but each place has different capacity. And so, yeah, there's something around the principle or strategically accurately assessing capacity in order to effectively transform the information and energy into creativity.
Okay, so to be creative, you have to assess the structure where it goes into, and different systems can hold different sort of energies, and you have to be able to assess, like, you know, is this an engine? Is it a truck engine? Is it a nuclear power plant? The structure to be able to hold the energy that you put into it.
Yes. Well, that's my time.
Oh, we have just 3 minutes if you want to continue.
Yeah, sure, I will.
Uh-huh.
I have a lot of energy, and my personal task is to do just what I described, to better accurately assess where I can bring things in a constructive way. And well, yeah. Lost my train of thought, but
well, you were saying that you have a lot of energy, and it sounds like you're saying that you need to look at how you direct it in constructive ways. So kind of assess the different directions and how to put the right amount of energy in there. Or
yes, that's my personal journey. And then as a member, you know, we don't have the building a culture of empathy doesn't have clear membership boundaries. Even, you know, that's another gray area, right? Like, who is a facilitator? Is a facilitator someone who has facilitated, or is a facilitator someone who there's an organization called the Building Culture of Empathy that gives you a gold star and says you are an official facilitator with us? And I'm not advocating for one or the other, but I can see how not being clear about that would that ambiguity is another kind of issue that's, you know, kind of begging a reckoning, because as people, yeah.
So you're kind of able to foresee that here's these issues, and they're going to have down the road, somehow they need to be addressed, and there's going to be some kind of a addressing of those. And the question of who's a facilitator, are you certified? It's kind of murky and not clear.
I want to just end, because I know it's coming to a time close, and say that I'm grateful that you invited me in. I think this was a constructive conversation. I want to say this because it's public. Like, anybody who's watching this, I'm open to talking about this more, and I would prefer that this conversation stay within the Empathy Cafe. Like, I would, like, in the future, I'd like to find a way to continue these conversations with others in a public place within the Empathy Cafe.
Okay, yeah, I invite that too. That any bring it in here, and so there's a lot of issues still, to kind of threads to follow. I think that, you know, were raised, and some ideas were coming up too. The main one was that I'm just adding this as an addition, was I kind of want everybody in the world to learn how to facilitate. You know, it's like, that's the goal. I mean, you don't need to train. It's like, just watch the videos, go facilitate your empathy circles. That's kind of so that's kind of where I'm coming from, around that 15 seconds. So, and I appreciate, I think I'm glad you were willing to have this. I found it very enriching, and, you know, really appreciative of it. And
same. Thank you, Edwin.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you in the room. Alrighty, see, is everybody back? Or I know people were dropping out, and it looks like they're having connection problems. Oh, is everybody? Do we have? Oh, there's Bill. Yeah. Okay, so we want to just take some time to, you know, like a minute or less, just to go around and share how is the circle for you, and just any insights about a value of a culture of empathy. I guess I can start. You know, I had a call with James. I was just in with James, and I thought it was really good, enjoyable. I don't want to be judgmental, good or bad. It was enjoyable. I felt a lot of insight and appreciation for the discussion. There's a lot of threads that I'm looking forward to exploring, and my mind is still kind of thinking about it. I didn't make any notes, so there was insights about what is a culture of empathy. One, you know, that I felt strongly about too is that a culture of empathy, there's sort of values of dialogue or empathic dialogues. And one of the principles is that we're willing to dialogue with everyone. You know, we might not be ready for it, and there's maybe steps that we can do, but to have sort of the intention of that. And so I didn't mention it there, but there's something about, you know, it might not be ready for something, for, you know, being willing to dialogue with everyone, but we can have sort of that vision and kind of be building up the resources to move towards that. So that's just something that's one of many aspects. Well, with that, Bill, do you want to go?
Sure. I had some of those internet connection problems, but I was, again, I was really touched by how, you know, people shared. And I think that maybe the value wasn't stated, at least when I was there, explicitly, but I think that there was a real sense of care for each other. And that's what came up, the care for each other that came up, and it was a felt experience. And I thank all my fellow participants for it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Andel?
I don't know what to say. Sorry.
Sure, no problem.
A little overwhelmed.
Okay. At the end, if you want to say something, feel free. We'll come if you're so. James?
Yeah, I also enjoyed the conversation with Edwin, and I'll second that on this idea that, you know, there are these values that we have, let's say, inclusion, where it makes sense to, it falls within a culture of empathy, but there's capacity issues, right? We want to include, but we don't include everyone, and we're growing and we're learning how to grow in different ways. Same thing with the dialogue. There's an intention or a value of being open to dialogue, which is not the same thing as, you know, demanding someone dialogue, you know, at will, when I want it, with who I want it. And so, I don't know, it's a really interesting balance between having the values, but not punishing ourselves when we don't necessarily live up to these values perfectly.
Great, thanks. Katrina?
Yeah, I had a dropout for a while. My PC just closed down. I don't know why. So it was interesting that I chose the word patience to start, because I really felt I needed a lot of patience in the session, because I realized that if a person is talking about something I know nothing about, and I have never even thought about this, and I have never had this impact in my life, I find it very difficult to follow their train of thought. And so I realized how important patience is, and it was a bit spooky that that word just popped into my mind, and I really needed it. And I also realized how important context is. So if a person is talking about something that's completely out of context, for me, in my own life personally, I really, really, really have to concentrate very hard on what they're saying to be able to get it. And so that was interesting. It was a very, very useful exercise for me, but not easy.
Great, thanks. Sophia?
Yeah, it felt more like a venting session where everybody was kind of like talking about issues that they're dealing with and in their daily life. At least for me, I think that, yeah, I felt heard a lot. I try to kind of like go back to the topic and weave it into what I was dealing with, and I think that what came up for me was that to build a culture of empathy, we really need to have adult human beings. And what I mean by that is like we can't have people being triggered, reacting, lashing out. We need adult human beings to create that culture of empathy, and then they can pass that on to other people. But that culture needs to, there needs to be a foundation of adult human beings, emotionally adult human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Pavel?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
I hope I won't take much time, but first it was nice to have like Bill as a co-facilitator. I noticed how he helped me a lot. And then Bill disappeared, his connection got lost, and there were a few issues afterwards, and I was able to deal with them accordingly. And then in terms of values, we didn't talk much about the values per se, but as Bill said, like this sense of care was there. And then what else came up from me is the sense of compassion towards others, accepting them as they are without judgment, being patient. And I totally can relate to Katrina, what she said about the context. When I'm not familiar with what the person is talking about, I've never been in his situation, like I cannot relate at all. It's very hard to follow his train of thought. Then I realized that sometimes reflecting on someone else's thoughts, when you heard them while you being a silent listener, and you bring this topic of their thoughts, when it's your time to speak, may bring some discomfort into them. And I can see how, I mean, like I didn't have permission to talk about them. So I can see how this might happen. And then James would motivate me to say what I'm about to say now, and having no fear of conflict escalation. I'm just gonna be honest with my words. I invited Ford to participate in today's empathy session, and I was kind of hoping that he wouldn't end up with James, because I thought that sometimes James might say things that would scare Ford and he would not come back. But James is the motivation of being truthful to myself and speaking my own truth. And I'm thankful for that. And that's all. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Dean?
I'd like to thank everyone in my circle for their honesty. It's funny, Katrina said she projected one emotion and then actually reflected on it throughout the sessions. I projected honesty, and honesty became my tenet throughout the emotional interactions. The reflective learning is like a muscle, and at first it's very hard to use it, but the more practice we become in the reflection, the stronger that muscle grows. So at first it's painful to use for some people. For most people, it was painful for me at first, but after undergoing the process for many months, I've learned to relax and actually reflect on the heart of the words rather than trying to micromanage the words and reflect on the words. And I think that's where empathy it's not a brain muscle, it's a heart muscle. So yeah, growing the heart muscle is what makes us empathic and adult rather than childlike. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, I have a lot to say on that. I hope we can talk about it sometime. Sally?
The heart muscle, or just plain training of people in empathy, or children and adults, people that have not participated in the empathy process. And I just want to say, first, in regards to Bill, he wanted to reach out in a simplified version of empathy, shortened, and I reached out to my husband, and we did the earth that that Edwin came up with. We have our planet system, and our earth was just me saying something or my husband saying something, and then just a quick reflection to make sure that everything is understood. And that's it, sentence by sentence, as we go throughout the day. And that's worked really well. And it's simple enough that I think kids could do.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. Sarah?
Yeah. I really appreciated our group. We also talked about honesty and maturity, and also about how you can have an impulse initially to do something, or to, but a mature person would kind of not act on their impulse, and that includes, not acting on the impulse to lash out, not acting on the triggers that are, very part of the normal human experience. We also shared about emotions, and also about context. And I also felt vulnerable because my computer head jack isn't working. So I did not realize that my audio wasn't coming out clearly. And I would have to swap out my laptop to fix that.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Hey, Bob, you're in half an hour, we have our Empathy Circle Facilitator support group. So you're welcome to come to that if you're hosting empathy circles and you want to share kind of plans to host them, actual projects of hosting them, getting feedback and support. So we'll have like 30 minutes break, and at this same URL, you can come and join that, and hope you're interested in taking part in that. So I think that's kind of it. If you check our Facebook page, you'll see other events that you can take part in. Tomorrow we have the XR, Extinction Rebellion, values and principles and demands. And we'll be looking at demand number 4. So if you're interested in that, even if you're not part of that group, you can still take part and talk about whatever's alive in you. So another way to get some experience. And next Tuesday, there's going to be a sort of an introduction empathy cafe for people interested in doing the training, and everybody's welcome to take part in that. It's not part of the training, it's just sort of an introduction, how, to get an overview and about it. So that's sort of another option. So that's it for me. Yeah, so Bill, you got something?
I just did you want to do a quick debrief with the facilitators?
Oh yeah, if you'd like to.
Okay.
Dean and Pavel. Yeah, if you want. Yeah, thanks for finding me. Just it'll be short. If you want to stay for that call. So that's it. I'm going to turn off the recording, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. We'll see. I'm not quite sure what the topic will be. It'll be a culture of empathy next week, maybe open topic. I'm not sure, or specific. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.